Yo, this is Mojo, and this is how I create.
Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else. Welcome back to This Is How We Create. My name is Martine Severin, your host. Today, I have Anthony Mojo Reed II, also known as Mojo, to the podcast. Mojo began his creative career by attending the prestigious Savannah College of Art and Design. He graduated in 2015 with a bachelor's degree in fine art with an emphasis in sequential art. His unique perspective in visual storytelling has allowed Mojo to enter the fine art world with an elevated sense of responsibility. By understanding the importance of people's interpretation of stories, it has allowed Mojo to craft detailed and thoughtful works of art. As a result, Mojo began to gain strong momentum once moving to Miami in 2018. His vibrant depictions of Black American culture brought a sense of purpose to this colorful city. His international portraits, insistence on positive representation, and his masterful technique quickly put him on the map as an artist to watch. His current partnerships include Nike Inc., When We All Vote with Michelle Obama, Goldman Global Arts, Wynwood Walls, to name a few. I could go on, but we only have so much time, everyone. Welcome to the show, Mojo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Mojo, you grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. How did you go from Anthony to Mojo? Where did the nickname come from?
You know, my nickname came from college, basically, when I went to Savannah College of Art and Design. One of my best friends, and he's also another very great artist, another Black artist named John Moody. We were both at the same school together and stuff. And one time, we used to go out all the time. Like in our free time, like after school, all the homework was done. We did our basketball and our lifting and all of that. And all our projects were done. We would go out on Thursday night at SCAD. So Thursday night at SCAD was like our Friday, basically. And so his sister was getting married, and and he went back to New Orleans where he's from. So I was like, all right, cool, that's a break. I had to go out. You know what I mean? We out here hanging out, trying to go talk to girls and stuff. And one of our friends was like really trying to get us to go out, to get me to go out. And I was like, all right, I'll go out. So these dudes are striking out with the ladies. Like, I mean, like they were just taking L's the whole night. And so when we were walking around, like a group of girls flagged me down, and I was talking to them. I got their numbers, and I walked back to my friend group that was taking all the L's, and they were like, oh, man, you brought the mojo back. And so ever since then, that was my nickname. And I'm talking like the next day, I'm talking my principal, like another principal, like the dean, teachers, students, anybody that I did not even know were calling me Mojo at that point. And then so later on, like actually kind of, turned the nickname to just basically be like turned like lemonade out of lemons, like I would try to manifest and like try to transmute energy, you get what I mean? And so like it started with that, but then it turned into like my way of life, like how I move.
Oh gosh, I can't wait to dig deeper into that. So when you were growing up as a child in St. Louis, can you tell us the story of how you fell in love with art?
So growing up in St. Louis, I was the kid that, I drew on the back of my homework. I was the one that loved Sonic the Hedgehog, Super Mario Brothers, and Space Jam. Space Jam was really big when I was a kid. The first one, Michael Jordan. And, I get emotional talking about this because when I grew up, my mom and dad were both in the household, right? I had my mom and my dad and my sister. And the two biggest things that I loved coming up was like basketball and art. And I didn't really know why I liked art. It was just something I just was, had talent in it, like something that I liked. And so in my free time, I would like read comic books and stuff like that. Like I really enjoy that, video games and things. And one of my other cousins who unfortunately like kind of got really bad into like drugs and alcoholism and things like that, he was the first person to show me like comics and things like that and drawing. And he was really good at drawing and stuff like that, like naturally talented. So going back to my father, he loved the fact that I was drawing. Now basketball, like we was super hard on me in basketball, which you should. Like you're gonna be good at a sport or anything in life, like you have to put in the work, the time, the dedication, the hours to do that. And so one day I used to like draw from like coloring books. I would use that as like something to look at, and I would try to like replicate it or duplicate it on like on another sheet of paper. And my dad at the time, he bought this like Jaguar car, like a Jaguar, like a brown Jaguar. And he was doing pretty well for himself, And so he had the manual, the car manual. So when you look in the manual, you can see like pictures of like illustrations of the car. And I remember I had to be around like, I would say 8, 9 or something like that, years old, where I took the manual, put it to the side, and I tried to draw the car, right? I tried to draw the car. And I drew it pretty close for a kid that's like 9. But when he came and saw the book, he was like, "Did you trace that?" And I was like, "No." Like, and he could tell I couldn't trace it. I didn't trace it because the image that I drew was far larger than the book. So with that, it was really the first time where like, my dad took one of my drawings and put it on his desk, like, at his job and things like that. He was super impressed by that. Unfortunately, and this will kind of go back into my St. Louis story and things like that, is that my father was murdered when I was 10. And it was a really hard time for me as a young Black kid, and just a kid in general. And of course it was hard on my mom and my family and things like that, because he was like a huge pillar in our family. Like for him to be in like alive, like we were able to go see my dad's side of the family, things like that. So when he was murdered, like I didn't really care about anything. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was a really angry kid coming up. I was quiet. I was ready to fight all the time, like all of those different things. And I remember like having these conversations and saying like wild things, like, not really caring about life, and, death is just a part of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like super, super pessimistic about life, things like that. And so my mom saw that, heard that, and was like, I can't do that. I can't let him get to this point, And so she put me in front of a therapist, a Black male therapist at the time. And this goes back to my upbringing too. My mom and dad decided to sacrifice, right? To put my sister and I into all Black private Catholic schools in St. Louis, which is very important. At least for me, it let me really identify my Blackness, things like that. And so when I actually got a chance to talk to this psychologist, I'm sorry, not therapist, his name was Mr. McCaskill. I'll never forget his name. When I spoke to him, I remember the first time I went to the therapy session, like I didn't say anything. Like I didn't talk. And he said, "You don't have to say anything. Like, I'm not going to make you talk. You can just come here and just sit. You can just sit and say nothing. You don't have to say anything, have to do anything. You can just come in here and just have a seat." And I remember the first few times, that was the train. I sort of. So I remember meeting with my counselor. I would say the counselor. I think counselor was the right word. When I met with the counselor, Mr. McCaskill, what I would do is I would go to his office, and the first few times I didn't say anything. Like I remember these vivid moments of not saying anything. I just brought my book bag. I had like little coloring books that were in my book bag, and I kept those because they weren't colored in. That meant I could create on top of that, or I could try to use that as like a way to look at something. So the first few times I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything, I just sat and was pouting, type of thing. Then I remember one time I came to his office, and I wasn't really talking, but I just brought out my coloring book and I just started like drawing in it and things like that. And I had like a little like computer paper, because that's what I used to draw on, computer paper. And that was the way I opened back up. Like that was the way, as a kid that lost his parent to murder, that was how I opened back up, was art. And that was the thing that felt the most right. Like it was a thing that made me feel like, that's how I could talk, you know, and that's how I could say what I wanted to say, you know. And so that's the moment where I fell in love with art, because in that moment, I didn't realize it until I got older, but that my mom and art saved me at that time, for sure. Because if I didn't do art, I had, or even I had access to a counselor, I probably wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today. You know what I mean? But that's how I fell in love with art.
Oh boy, what a story. Thank you for telling me about your dad. And I just want to say, if the way you describe him, he must have been a special person indeed. Thank you for sharing.
Of course, he was, you know, and he taught me a bunch while I was here, even in those small years. You know, those are things I still carry today. My mom still looks at me and say I look like him and stuff. You know, I see my son, he's 18. He looks like me when I was young, you know, and you know, he was very impactful, and it took me time to heal from that, because it played a huge role in all of my relationships. After that, even with family, it played a huge role and things like that. And then later on, of course, it played a role in my business, right? Like, because it's all about communication and trusting people and putting yourself out there, and accepting people for who they are, and all of that plays a role, those type of conversations and connections and things. And that brings me to the space where art is the thing that helped me, like I said, like it helped me communicate, but it also helped me to be introspective as well.
Okay, so did you go to SCAD in Savannah or in Georgia, or in Atlanta, I should say?
Yeah, so the journey to college. So basically, long story short, when I graduated from high school, I graduated high school when I was 17, like turning 18 in the summer, right? Oh, I'm sorry, in the fall. So my birthday is in September. So when I went to school the first time, basically I could not afford to pay to go to college. So they basically kicked me out, honestly. That's what happened. But interestingly enough, during that time is when I was talking to my son's mom, and I had my son at 19. So I did exactly what my mom told me not to do. She was like, don't go to school and come back with no baby. And that's exactly what I did. Like, but at the same time, what was great about that was that it made me understand, like at a very early age, it was like I had to live outside of myself. So when my son was born, that's when I was like, okay, well, I got to figure something out, because at some point my son's going to ask me, which he did, is like, you know, he's going to ask me how to do certain things, or he's going to say, well, I didn't have to do this because you did. Like, you know, I wanted to avoid all of that. So when I decided, I was like, well, if I want to take care of my son, I want to take care of my son in a way that I am grateful to wake up. Like, I'm happy to wake up to go do this. And I want to be an inspiration to him. I want to be a role model for my son. So when he was 19, I was working at UPS for like 3 years, from 19 to 21. It was the most miserable like years of my life. Like, I hated them years, super depressed. And I was just like, art popped up again. It popped up again. Like I began looking at anime again and drawing and stuff. And I started like drawing and kind of trying to figure that out. And I was like, one of my friends at the time, he told me, he was like, you know, if you decide to go back to school, like you never finished, you never got your bachelor's degree. So you realize that you still can utilize those funds, like the loans and the grants and all the scholarships. You can utilize those like at this point in your life. And if you're going to go to school, you should go to school for something you really like. And they would look at my sketches and stuff. And this is in between playing video games and playing, doing our thing and hanging out and stuff. And I was like, well, maybe I'll think about that. And everything else just didn't seem like it was working. So with that time, I decided like, well, maybe I should go back to school. This is in St. Louis. And I remember taking this like manila folder with like my little sketches and stuff. And I Googled, because at the time, like I told you, I got kicked out the first time with the college. So I was like nervous about going to college again. Cause like, well, I got the chops to do it, but I don't have the bread to stay and sustain myself to go. So I just Googled one day, interest-free student loan is like it's what I Googled. Like, now you think, how in the hell are you gonna find interest-free student loan in the world? And luckily I did. I found the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis. And the Scholarship Foundation in St. Louis, which is led by Faith Sandler, who I love and miss dearly, because I haven't seen her in a while and stuff. And I know her family's doing pretty well. I hope her family's doing really well. I walked to the organization, and they had like this resale store, this clothing resale store, almost like a thrift store, but they had like all of the like kind of rich people that were in the St. Louis area. What they would do is they would donate like their clothes, right? Like their old expensive clothes, and then the store would resell it. It was called the scholarship. They would resell the clothes to get that money, and that's how they would give out interest-free student loans. And also what they also did was they were really good at it as like breaking down the college strategy of how to get into a college, right? And they made it easy. Now you can like actually talk to somebody. So I spoke to Teresa Stock at the time, and I showed her my little manila folder. I had all my little paper printed out. I had everything stapled. I had everything ready to go. I had everything. I'm talking like letter writing, like all of this stuff. And the lady Teresa was really impressed. So she took my file up to the CEO, and she came back down and was like, I want to meet you, So I came up there a minute, like I'm just a young kid that's like, hey, I want to go to school for art. This was 2010. And so I decided, I was like, if I'm going to go, I want to really learn this. Like I want to be classically trained to be an artist. Like to take these things that I've learned, I want to be able to translate that as a professional. And so she looked at my portfolio, which I learned later on, because her husband was an art teacher, and he looked at everything too. So I didn't learn this until I graduated. All right. So they looked at it, and they was like, the CEO came to me and was like, listen, I know you want to go to school, and I see it in you. I see that you can do it. And she was like, what I'll do is I'll pay for you to go to the community college, like a check, give you a straight up check, and this is how you go to school. In the meantime, you work at the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis, and you just do that. You work and you go to school. And I was like, so fine. I was like, all right, cool. Like, what's the harm in that? And she's like, but before you do this, I want you to go to the community college and like meet Jim Gormley and show him your work. And then, if you like it, cool. Write the check. You can start going to school in the summer. And if you don't, we'll keep looking. So I went to go meet Jim Gormley, and it's at the community college in Ferguson, right? So where I went was called St. Louis Community College, Florissant Valley, right? Florissant Valley is on West Florissant. So where Michael Brown was murdered and all of those cars was coming out, my mother used to live off of that street. So she lived like maybe up the street and around the corner from like West Florissant. So anybody from St. Louis knows, if anybody's listening from St. Louis, they know St. Louis Community College, Flow Valley. We called it Flow Valley, right? So I went there, I met Jim Gormley, and I walked around and I saw art students like work hanging up on around the walls and stuff. And I was like, man, this is really cool. Like I'm seeing like really like drawings of like figure drawings and still life and paintings and graphic design and illustrations and photo of photography, like hanging up like fine art. And I'm seeing kids that look like me. I'm seeing kids that are white. I'm seeing like gay, straight. I'm seeing everything. Like, and the thing that was so that caught my attention was like how good the art was and how that meant the most. And that, people were putting their like personal take on art into, or like their very DNA into the work that they were making, even as students. So when I walked in, I was like, what am I going to learn at a community college? Like, what am I going to learn at a community college? So the thing that Jim Gormley said was, it doesn't matter what college you go to, what school you go to, whether it's, this is before YouTube and all that. He was like, doesn't matter what school you go to. It's all about your drive and how good do you want to be. And you're going to create your own path that way. So, so I thought about it, and I was like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. Like, and I started in the summer of 2010, and I remember going to my first class, and it was my first teacher. His name was Chris Day. He's my favorite artist of all time. Like, technical, like painter, illustrator, and how he talked about, like, that opened me up. Like, that was the moment that opened me up to art and having it be more real than just like representing something or trying to duplicate an image or anything like that, or what's in front of you. Went to my first class, and he was at this time, he was a master level, or he was studying to be a master painter at Fonbaugh University in St. Louis. First class in the summer, you can only take 2. It was a drawing class, and we were sitting on those horse benches. Like, I don't know if you ever been in front of where you sit in it, you straddle it, and you got to put your clipboard on top in front of it, type of thing. He took computer paper, which that's the thing I was drawing on as a kid. He took it and just threw it on the ground. Like, he just threw it in the air and it just landed on the ground. He's like, we're drawing this for 2 weeks. No, I was like, that's a piece of cake. What do you mean? It's paper. Like how hard could it really be? That was the hardest shit I've ever drawn at that point in my life. Like, I was like, paper this hard? But it teaches you perspective and controlling your composition, trying to get all of the paper in one drawing and things like that, negative space and all of that kind of stuff. When I couldn't draw that and I was getting frustrated, I humbled myself, and I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be at. And from that point, those were the best 2 years of my, like, at the beginning, that was the best years of my art. Like, that's how I had my foundation. My foundation comes from the St. Louis Community College, 100%. But that's how it started in St. Louis. But then going to SCAD, and now this goes back to more personal things, which is great, because this is a part of the story, is when I finished at the community college. Now, I excelled at the community college because I kept saying this, and I understand the law of attraction and manifestation, like that. I just remember saying all the time, if I can go to school without having to worry about paying for it or figure out how to pay, I will excel. If everything's taken care of, I will excel. I will do what is necessary to excel. So I finished the community college 2 years completely, summer, fall, spring, with a 3.8 accumulative GPA. And then I had like a portfolio. So I had like drawings, I had classical, actual class, that's what they're looking for, right? Which I could talk a bunch about people that want to go to college that don't have to go to an art school that don't have the funds, but they really want to go. There's a way of doing it. And that's how I got to go. So when it was time to think about whether or not I wanted to transfer, I had a couple of professors, which you'll hear a lot in my stories, that I've always had people helping me. And I don't forget their names. Even the teacher that helped me, Mrs. Dennis, she helped me as well as a kid. This is after my father was murdered. Like, I would give up my recess time to draw. What kids, giving up recess to draw? So when I finished at that time, I was looking to transfer to different schools. At the time, I wanted to go to Parsons in New York. I wanted to go there. I applied to Ringling. I had got into Ringling as well, looking at RISD. I was looking at all different types of schools. And I was also looking at SCAD as well. But SCAD was kind of, unfortunately, it was low on my list, not because it was like a bad school. It was just like, I just didn't want to go to the South. Like I was already living in Missouri, in St. Louis. I wanted something, a fresh take. I wanted something different. And so what I did was I basically let those schools wage war against each other to give me the bigger award letter for me to go to the school. So I applied to all of the schools, and then I would take all of the award letters, even the schools I didn't want to go to. I would apply to, and then whoever gave me the bigger number is the school I will go to, because in my mind I was like, the one that gives me the most money wants me to go to the school. And so I will openly and transparently get on the phone and be like, hey, I really want to go to your school, but this school is offering me this. Like, if we can kind of,
Did you do that actually?
I 100% did that. 100%. Any student that is looking to go to an art school and your portfolio is really good and your grades are really good, definitely do that. Like, you don't have to accept the first offer. You get what I'm saying? Like, you keep them, and then you kind of see who's giving you the most. You know what I mean? And you have power in that, because you got to think that these schools, their business comes from admission. It comes from the admission. So even I'm learning that more so than anything when it comes to, like, when I work with SCAD and things like that, because that's the thing. They need more students. And so as an ambassador of the college, like, I talk to students very openly about how good is the school, or how is school even important, things like that. And I do think it is. So I'm having them wage war on each other. And SCAD was like, listen, we really want you to go here. Here's the award letter. As soon as I get my award letter, my mother is diagnosed with breast cancer. As soon as I got it. And I was like, I didn't want to go. I talked to my mom, because I was sharing her the whole process of, the college route. Now, my sister, she's younger, so she had more of an understanding to go to college, because, like, unfortunately, like, since I didn't know how to pay, it made it easier for all of us to learn how this happens. So by the time the arts thing comes around, like, I'm the first person in my family to go to an art school. And so we were trying to figure all of this out and stuff. And then at the same time, I gets breast cancer. So when she was diagnosed, I had a real talk about, like, Mom, like, I don't think I can go. Plus, I was super burnt out because I was going to school all year round. I was super burnt out. I was working.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were working, you were going to school, and you had your little one. And then there's your personal life as well. So I can only imagine, and having done it myself, it's intense. It's an intense experience.
It's intense. And so I talked to my mom, and she stopped me in my tracks. She was like, you're going to go to that school, because she did her own research. You know what I mean? She was like, I feel comfortable with you going to this school. Like, I feel like you'll be taken care of, and I know you're going to do well. She was like, so I'm going to see you graduate. I'm going to watch you do your thing in your career. Like, I'm going to be there. Like, don't even worry about that. I'll figure out how to use this FaceTime on this phone somehow to see and talk to you all the time, So when she gave me that grace and that, that invitation to go, I was like, man, I have to make this mean something, because, like, I'm sacrificing time with my mom. Like, you know what I mean? Like, already using my first period, second period, like, having going through this. And there's another truth. So, like, after losing my father, my first parent, now it's like, I'm about to go through this again. And I was like, dude, I cannot go through that. When she gave me the grace to go, I was like, I'm knocking this one out the park too. So 2012 is when I went to SCAD, transferred to go to SCAD. And it that changed my life too, because I was just being me at that school. Same guy that's sitting in front of you right now. Of course, I've grown a bunch, but all of that was really important because it taught me how to be a professional. It taught me how to work under the gun. It taught me how to literally find my own voice and create in a small amount of time. There's another train. When I went to SCAD, that taught me how to be a storyteller. It taught me how to create my own voice and then take that unique voice, and whenever I create a project in a timeline, then I can create it like high level, efficiently and concisely and effectively. So that's what SCAD really taught me.
So I'd love to tease your answer a little bit in terms of what you learned about storytelling. How did you become a good storyteller? And so what are some of the things that you learned that aided you in that task?
So the way that I became a storyteller, and I believe for me, being a storyteller is inherent. Like I think that everyone is a storyteller. That's how we communicate, right? We're telling stories back and forth with people, and that's how we, engage and connect. So the first thing that I remember as a storyteller and being so enticed with storytelling is before comics, just before movies and things like that, was basically my mom would have like this old like picture box with Polaroids in it of family photos. And she would take them and we would just dump them all on the kitchen table with all of our family, my cousins hanging around. And we all looking at these pictures and we laughing at her and we giggling. Oh, look how skinny you look, or look at your butt teeth, or look at your hair, it's crazy, or look at this moment, look at this Thanksgiving moment. Look at mama when she was 16, look at daddy when he was 20 and things like that, And then what my mom would do is she'll take the picture and she would tell us the story about the picture before it was taken. And to me, I was so like into that. Like I was so into understanding like what happened in this moment to take that picture, and why was it so important to save it, and to share it as a memory later, right? Like, especially in today's society, everything's so fast, every day is literally a new day almost, where it's like the past plays a role historically, but like when it comes to moments, like it's just a snap, take a picture of this food that I'm about to eat and never post it, and then it's gone, That was the first initiation for me when it came to storytelling. The next way that I learned about storytelling was like, I'm a huge movie person. Like I love movies and I love like video games and things like that, but things that are like more story driven. So I'm definitely at the point, I'm the guy that will ruin a movie if like I'm watching it and it's got plot holes and all these different things, or like composition, if the composition ain't right or it's confusing, like then that
Absolutely.
like, oh.
You have to drop some tea. Tell us which ones bug you.
What's something that gets me? I think right now the thing that kind of annoys me a little bit, everybody, it's the selfie stuff. Like I think it's a human moment because you're talking to the cell phone and things like that. So when I see videos like advertising videos of selfies and things, it lets me know that they're trying to connect with that audience. You know what I mean? Which is fine because you got to have what's the word I'm looking for? An audience that you want to, speak with. But I think the best stuff that I've seen is things that are not about the algorithm, like things that are just created in the manner in which they want to. Sometimes, like even now, I've been posting my videos horizontally, meaning like it's full on the screen vertically. So you have to turn your phone like this, right? And so I don't tell people to turn their phone or nothing because you're going to have to. You're going to have to turn your phone to look at it normally. But then when people repost it, they like take it, shrink it, and then like make it horizontal. So now you can't even see the video like completely, you know. And so it's things like that, like, you know, that make me kind of like, you know, maybe squeamish a little bit, you know. But storytelling wise, like some of my favorite stuff is like Martin Scorsese movies. I like original classics, but also like new stuff that has like more of a meaning and things. Even like stuff like Legally Blind is a really good movie. You know, the title's really good and things like that. So, but going back to the storytelling, when I went to SCAD, you know, I had like a loose knowledge of storytelling, not too much enough to like tell my story. But it was one particular professor's name was Professor Tom Lyle. He hated being called Lyle because he didn't want to sound like a gym coach. But he was one of the first creators of one of like the Scarlet Spider-Man, I believe, and also one of the Robins with the Mohawk. But he was a professor, and we had this project we had to do, which I didn't finish at SCAD. And it was called, we had to do a memoir comic. So a memoir comic is when we had to think about a moment in our life that we learned something from, and we had to create a comic based on this, a 4-page comic based on this. And the moment I decided, because I sat and thought about it, I said, well, what have I learned? You know? And then I thought about a moment back in St. Louis where this is the first time I ever encountered police in a really scary way. And basically I drew this comic, you know, of course I survived because I was too afraid to run. I wanted to run, but I was afraid. So I didn't feel anything. So I just stood there. And I remember doing a comic about it. And I didn't finish it. I think I finished like the first 2 pages and the other pages just because the timeline was crazy. Like that's the moment me getting used to like the timing of SCAD and projects and things like that. But they took the comic and then they passed it around the faculty, the SCAD faculty and the dean. The dean now, Doug, he pulled me to the side and we talked. And he showed me, he was like, man, this is like, first of all, this is like really cool storytelling. But he was like, man, like he started crying a little bit because he was just like, if you would have ran or if you would not have made it out of this, you would not be standing in front of me today. And I didn't think about it like that, you know, and that goes back to that St. Louis mentality where, you know, this is your life. This is a part of it. You avoid police, or you drive the Batcave way where you avoid like major streets where the cops will just pull you over and just where you going type of thing. And I made a comic about that. And so that was the moment where I realized like I didn't have to create the next Star Wars or the next X-Men. I could actually talk about my own life, you know, and do a story based on that. And so the more I dug into like storytelling and specifically visual storytelling, so pre-production, art, storyboarding, character designs, script writing, comic illustration, that's where I learned the storytelling techniques. Like you had to learn how to tell a story in a way that caught someone's attention and kept it and held on to it for a long amount of time. And so basically I just took my storytelling and comic like background and put that into my original painting. Like that's really what I did, and also into my mural work. So that's where the storytelling evolved. So it evolved from me being, hey, I want to draw like other people's stories, which is no problem with that. But I was like, I saw that I could tell my story. Then I was like, well, if I tell my story, that means that the more people I talk to, I could learn about their story and tell their story, like, and have that responsibility with that. So that is the evolution of the storytelling.
Okay. So my question next for you is, how did you end up in Miami, and how did you come to meet the curator of Wynwood Walls, Jessica Goldman?
Wow. So I came to Miami around 2018. And this is after I graduated from SCAD. I graduated from SCAD in 2015. My first job, 2016, which it took me about like a year to get a job. So that's just across the board. Like, when you get out of school, unless you've been working on internships ever since you was a sophomore, which is the best way to do it, which I think that's the best way, is like kind of getting experience in your field and things like that. But if you don't, it's hard. So, so my first job was graphic design for what is it called? Insurance company for other companies. So I was doing graphic design for that. I got fired the first week and a half I was there. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. So right after that, I got asked to teach at the community college, the one that I started at. So I went back to I went back to St. Louis Community College at Flow Valley, and I started to teach there. That is where I learned how to paint. So I went back to the community college as a professor, and I was shocked that I'm young and black at this community college as a teacher, thinking like, man, ain't nobody gonna come to my class and they're gonna be acting a fool and not thinking I'm gonna own me and all this kind of stuff. And on the contrary, like, my classes were packed, and people wanted to know what I was going to say. And like, you went to SCAD, we want to know how to get there. I was like, man, honestly, it's literally this. Like, everything I'm doing right now, this is SCAD. Basically, the only difference is I'm in Savannah, and you just got all infinite resources, of course, but the classes and the things we're teaching is the same. And that's when I really started to like talk to a lot more people. But it got to the point where when Michael Brown was murdered in 2016, that's when I actually had a project where I was working on the Star Wars project. That's like something I always wanted to do. And I remember working on this project, and Michael Brown gets murdered. And I really felt like I was really like wasting my art on something that doesn't mean that Star Wars doesn't mean anything or it's not important, but it just didn't feel right to work on that when I could be possibly making some artwork that contributed to Michael Brown's like legacy, or to at least like try to help heal it with the only voice that I knew about coming as a kid is art. So as a teacher, I went to the school and said, hey, I would love to do like an art show or something. Like, can we do something to help this? Like, we in the neighborhood, we're artists, this art school. I would love to do something for this. I remember talking to a higher up, and she was like, absolutely, we're not going towards that. And if you want to do that, we can create a board, right? Like a board of people to make decisions, and we can maybe work from there. And I remember leaving that so distraught. Like, I left like, man, I feel like that's a moment where art could have done something. Like, you got young Black students that were the student body that's at Flow Valley reflects the St. Louis community as a whole. And I remember them telling me like, nah, like, we not doing that. I remember walking away crying. I went to the faculty bathroom and started crying about that. And I called my mentor at the time, Faith Sandler, the CEO of the Scholarship Foundation in St. Louis. And she gave me some really valuable advice. She said, you know what you do is you take the information you need and you discard the rest, right? And she like, and you'll find a way. And she kept telling me that all the time. I'm like, I'm just Anthony. I'm just a Mojo. Like no one's listening to me. I'm giving out this free game. I'm telling people how to do certain things. I'm learning some things. Some things I kind of have a little bit more under the belt, especially when it came like the technique and painting and art and drawing and things like that. But paint was so new, so I'm like humbly learning that from John, and taking a class with Chris Day when I got back as a professor. So as a professor, I'm in class with students, with my same students, writing notes and all that. And I remember being like, yeah, I think, all right. And I also remember talking to my boss. she basically was like, I see you putting a lot of energy into the students, like, but I also want you to put that energy into yourself too. I was like, okay. And right after that, I had an opportunity to do a mural with Salvation Army because I have done so much work within the community in St. Louis, and I like met so many people, and I had a really great reputation. And they were like, yeah, like we want Mojo to do it. So with just having them saying yes to the project, I was like, at the time I also was talking to my ex at the time, and she was in Miami. I was like, well, I want to take the risk. I'm gonna take the risk and move to Miami. I moved to Miami with like $300 in my pocket, one-way ticket, in a relationship with only a what is it called? Proposal sent in to the the Salvation Army. So I moved to Miami, and the first thing I'm doing is doing a mural in the juvenile detention center. So that's how I moved to Miami. Like,
how did that mural come about?
The
juvenile center.
So at the time, my ex was doing a mural on the inside, and then I met the curator. So I was like helping her, like I was basically helping her work on it and stuff like that. And then he was like, "Yo, like I see your work, your other paintings and your drawings," because I was still drawing and painting and stuff like that. He's like, "Yo, here's a wall. You could do a wall next to her model." I'll never forget him because he was the first person. That was the first mural I ever did, So with that, it was such a great journey because it taught me so much. I just was like a sponge. I was like soaking in everything. I'm looking at everything. I'm learning everything. I'm seeing how people conserve paint. I'm seeing everybody got ladders and like you people using projectors, like all this stuff. But that's how I did
that. And look at you now.
Yeah.
Such like drastic difference, right? Because you were such a newbie at that point, and now you probably have techniques that you could be teaching. You could teach another class, go professor on how to make murals.
Like I think about that a lot too, at least like trying to give people a way to execute like these things, right? So you asked about like Wynwood Wall. So the thing about Wynwood is that there's no application for that. There's no artist call to artists. And if it is, it's very, very slim to do that, for them to actually do that. And it's also to be the street art museum in the world. Like I would say it's in the world. And it's here in the backyard of Miami.
Hey, thanks so much for watching and for listening. Don't forget to tune in for the second part of our conversation with Mojo Reed. In the second part of our talk, Mojo generously shares his favorite book, the system that he uses to ensure his success, and how to attract and manage your clients. Enjoy.